Alright guys, so last time we talked about the citric acid cycle. The overall goal of today's lecture is to talk about aerobic respiration. Remember the three steps. It starts with glycolysis. Citric acid cycle is the next that produces a whole bunch of NADH and FADH2, which is going to be used to energize the last part of aerobic respiration, which is the electron transport chain. Okay, so let's step over here. We're talking about the electron transport chain. This is going to occur inside the mitochondria. Specifically, if you remember, this is what a mitochondrion looks like. It's this little organelle that has two cell membranes. It has this outer cell membrane and then this inner cell membrane. The electron transport chain occurs across the inner cell membrane right there. Okay, so we're going to step over here and we're going to see what's going on. First, I want you to notice we have a cell membrane. This is that inner cell membrane of the mitochondria. Okay? Another thing I want you to remember is that we're going to be talking about hydrogen atoms here. Remember, a hydrogen atom is a very simple atom. It consists of one proton and one electron. Okay? Now, remember all those NADH and FADH2 molecules that were energized during the citric acid cycle? Well, they need to get rid of that energy. They can't really handle all of that energy. So we're going to take one molecule of NADH and it's going to give up that extra hydrogen atom that it gained. Remember, a hydrogen atom consists of one electron and one proton, so it's going to give up this hydrogen atom. Here's the hydrogen ion, which is a proton of that atom, and here's the electron. That allows NADH to turn back into NAD+. It's given up that energy. Well, this electron, think of it as electricity. This electron is going to jump into the cell membrane and it starts bouncing around. It literally has energized this cell membrane. This little pink circle is a proton pump. This electron is going to jump through it and it's going to energize that pump. This proton pump is going to do just that. It's going to pump protons. Well, that proton that was produced here when NADH gave up that hydrogen atom and it split into the hydrogen ion and the electron, this hydrogen ion or proton is going to get pumped from inside the inner membrane or the mitochondria to the outside of that inner membrane. And this keeps happening. Every time an NADH molecule comes in and splits up, that proton gets pumped to this space outside of the inner membrane, which causes more and more of these protons to start building up in concentration here. The electron continues to kind of bounce through this cell membrane. It bounces through another proton pump, which continues to pump protons from the inside to the outside of this inner cell membrane. And as you can see, now we've got a bunch of protons up here. Well, the protons want to diffuse back across this inner membrane, but the only way it can get through is through this special protein pump called ATP synthase, this special protein called ATP synthase. It will allow protons to diffuse across the inner membrane, and every time it does it, it's going to turn like a turbine. And as this ATP synthase turns, it's going to turn a molecule of adenine diphosphate into adenine triphosphate. And that is the overall value of the electron transport chain. Every time a proton diffuses from here to there across this inner cell membrane, it is allowing ATP synthase to produce a molecule of ATP. It does this over and over and over to produce a whole bunch of ATP for each molecule of glucose. So that's great and all, but we do have a problem. These electrons that were kind of bouncing through the cell membrane, eventually they kind of run out of energy and they need a place to go. Okay, so here I've drawn two electrons that have kind of lost energy and fallen out of the cell membrane. We need something that's able to accept these electrons. That's where oxygen comes in. Now remember, oxygen is required for aerobic respiration, and this is the first time we've mentioned it. The citric acid cycle doesn't need it, glycolysis doesn't need it, and the electron transport chain hasn't needed it up until now. Well, remember, oxygen gas is two oxygen molecules stuck together. First, these guys are going to split. Now, this means we have two oxygen atoms by themselves. An oxygen atom by itself is not happy because it only has 6 electrons in its outer shell. It needs 8 to be stable. Well, this is exactly what this oxygen atom needs. We have 2 electrons here. The electrons need somewhere to go. They're going to jump right into that outer shell, and that's going to make oxygen a stable atom. However, with the 2 electrons, it now has a negative charge of 2. right? Because each electron has a negative charge. Well, the hydrogen ions, or these protons that have just entered into this inner space of the inside of the cell membrane of the mitochondria, they're going to be attracted to this negative charge. Two protons are going to attach onto oxygen, and if you have two hydrogens attached onto oxygen, that gives you water, which is one of the byproducts of cellular respiration. So, just to review here, if we come back over here to this overall equation, what we have is glucose, right here, mixed with oxygen, right? We kind of move the camera over a little bit more. Let's see if it'll follow me here. Hello, over here. There we go. So what we get is you get glucose plus oxygen yields carbon dioxide, water, and ATP. So what happens over here, if we don't have oxygen, this whole process backs up. The electrons have nowhere to go. It's like a clog in a pipe. The electrons can't move. We can't pump protons up here. We cannot produce ATP using ATP synthase, and it just stops the whole process. That's why when there's no oxygen, anaerobic respiration occurs instead.